Bueno, es un verdadero placer compartir mesa y poder presentar al doctor Reinaldo Guimarães. Él es médico.
This is Sovaldi Guimarães. He's a physician with a master in social medicine, and he's been working in the field of health technologies. He was Secretary of Science and Technology in Brazil from 2007 to 2010, Vice President of Technological Development of Biocruz, part of the Ministry of Health, President of the Foundation to Foster Development in Rio de Janeiro, currently President of the Fine Chemistry and Biotechnology companies in Brazil. Good afternoon. First, I would like to thank the invitation. I'm going to be speaking in Portuguese because my Portuñol is enough just to make the introduction and to make questions. I would like to thank Isaac's invitation to be part of this fantastic seminar that was held yesterday and today. When José Temporao invited me to come to this seminar, he asked me to talk about the experience, the Brazilian experience in the use of the flexibilities of the TRIPS agreements to enhance access. There's a paradox here. I realized that as the seminar was developing, because there was some issues as to medicines in Brazil, but the use of flexibilities is not a determinant factor to expand access. So I decided to reorganize my presentation, and I'm going to be talking about, very briefly, intellectual property, because after 2 days in the seminar, there's not much more to say about IP. Then I'm going to move to the Brazilian case, and I'm going to finish by presenting new challenges that we have to face. Something that was certain about presentations today is this avalanche, this wave of measures called the TRIPS Plus to protect patents in health products. I think it is true. I think this is true, and I believe these two phrases that are about 60 years apart. One is a declaration from 1952 from the then Merck president in the United States. And talking to an association of doctors, he said that medicine is for the people. Profits follow. That is the essence of Mr. Merck's message in 1952. But in 2014, Bayer's CEO said very candidly this phrase: we did not develop this medicine for Indians. We developed it for Western patients who can afford it. I believe that these 2 points of view clearly show and describe the shift that has derived in what we call today the big pharma. In 1952, there was no big pharma, but in 2014, yes, we do have a big pharma. Susan Sell talked about winter is coming, and winter is coming in the patent world. I believe this winter is coming, yes, and we've been going through several winters already. And our discussions about IP or industrial property are debates that have properly focused, that's the case here, focused on matters relative to economic issues. The difficulty to have access due to price increases, the detriment suffered by southern cone countries, developing countries too, derive from the patent system that do not care about people's interests but about big companies' interests. We should explore something else, though, which is the patent maximalism. That's a moral issue. Susan Sell, in her presentation yesterday morning, chose three industrial sectors to explain what she meant: entertainment, that is culture, technology, communication and IT, and industrial health products, especially medicines. Let me tell you that these three sectors, I'm sure, were chosen because Susan thought that they are the ones that create more tension or have created more tension in intellectual property realms. The three are different, though. That refers to the access to industrial health problems. It's different in entertainment and culture. The lack of elasticity in health products is an issue. What do I mean? Well, what does it matter, if it matters, to know that Brazil has a lower rate of mobiles per capita? That is not important, actually. And if that Brazilian has not a last generation mobile, he will have a cheaper one. And elasticity is huge in terms of access to communication devices. The same, there's a big elasticity in culture. Of course, it is not good to see good movies, but I can see bad movies. And access to industrial health products is different because it relates to an essential right, the right to life.
When in the debate on the patents policy, there is a moral dilemma plus an economic dilemma, and I think this should be stressed here and today. If we think about it, nowadays the main moral dilemmas in public health policies in the world are on the side. The first one is the growth of the share of technosciences in the interventions, in the human health interventions. And the second important chapter that gives rise to moral dilemmas is the increasing tension between access to health protection tools and business interests, which is what we are talking about here. So I'm going to talk about that first. The crisis, the big pharma crisis, which has been, or which was mentioned yesterday, is the result of the fact that few new molecules are launched. We are like at the patent cliffs. Some patents are also expiring. We can see, oh, that example was mentioned yesterday. And I finished talking about patents by saying something which Amos Oz, quoting Amos Oz in 2010, talking about the foreign politics of Israel. He said that the foreign politics or foreign policies of Israel understand that what wasn't done through force can be done by using even more force. I think that the basic idea of TRIPS Plus is doing what Amos said. What could not be done through patents could may be done with more patents, and I think that is the spirit of TRIPS Plus. And now I'm going to talk about Brazil proper. Brazil has a flourishing pharmaceutical market. In 2013, this was a market of 22 billion, and 30% of that market is catered for by the single healthcare system. 30% of the pharmaceutical market is supplied by the single healthcare system, which is a free system. From the side of supply, talking about pharmaceutical units, a little bit over 50% of the market is produced by Brazilian domestic companies.
Que funcionam no Brasil.
The rest is accounted for by multinational companies having operations in Brazil. When we talk about value, not about units, the local companies represent a little bit less than 50%. And from the side of demand, well, the figures are the ones you have just seen. I said the expansion of access and the expansion of this market was not related to the flexibility. We have a TRIPS Plus legal framework as the one which was just mentioned. The one we have dates back to 1996 to 1997. And India, for example, to mention another large country, passed its law in 2005. In Brazil, in the 90s, the Brazilian government followed a neoliberal policy of trade opening, which led to closing over 1,000 productive units in the area, or productive units in the pharmacochemistry arena. And it also passed a patent law, which is TRIPS Plus. There is an important lobbying activity by the pharmaceutical company at Parliament, which makes it very hard to amend this act. Our act, as Kent said, accepts the pipeline, and all the patents in the pipeline have already been granted, most of them. We have an extension of a protection term for delays at the National Institute of Industrial Property. That is, the poor operation of a government agency has consequences on competition, on free market competition. And the market is not owned by the administration. It's different actors that play a role in the market. It's a company that goes to a court, calls for this element of Article 40 to be called unconstitutional. We patent polymorphs and second-use drugs, but in the last few years, the National Institute for Industrial Protection, INPI, was very careful when it analyzed the patent requests for second-use polymorphs, etc. And we have too much protection for data in the files from Anvisa. Looking at the case of Ecuador and Argentina, I believe that these two countries at least are much advanced vis-à-vis Brazil in the area of an industrial property policy, intellectual property policy, sorry. What is expanding the access to medication in Brazil is these four elements we can see on the screen. Number one, the law for generic drugs, which on its own may be the main tool to expand access. It was passed in the year 2000. And low unemployment rate, real increases in the minimum salary and social inclusion policies. These three elements, low unemployment, increases in the minimum salary, and social inclusion policies, have led to a large number of families, of Brazilian families, have driven a large number of families to go above the poverty line, to join the market, to join the largest cities. And this happened in the two terms of Mr. Lula and in the current term of Ms. Rousseff. We also have popular pharmacies today. We have a program of popular pharmacies. I think Brazil is the country that has the largest number of pharmacies. We have about 70,000 pharmacies. I don't know why there are so many, but well, that's the case. Many stores are being closed in different neighborhoods, and new pharmacies are opened. But the Ministry of Health has already made agreements with networks and with isolated pharmacies, by which there is a basket. I don't know how many agents it includes, about 30 agents, and this basket is subsidized at 90% of its price. Out of pocket, 90% is paid by the ministry by electronic means. It's not the consumers who pay, or it's not the physicians, or it's not the French system. It's a different system. And it's a series of agents for hypertension and diabetes, two serious conditions in Brazil. With due respect to forgotten diseases, I'd like to say that the morbid mortality profile for most of the developing countries does not include viral diseases. Our main problems are cancer, hepatitis, diabetes. That is a profile which is very similar to the profile found in developed countries in the northern hemisphere. So for hypertension and diabetes, agents are fully subsidized. Patients can go to a pharmacy and get a set of agents, hypertensive drugs and glycemia-reducing agents. They take them home for free. And the final bullet point is the policy designed by the Ministry of Health and the Development Bank, which is a productive development policy, which includes these four elements. First, there is a definition of strategic industrial products for the single health system. I think that Ecuador mentioned compulsory licensing. The Ministry of Health would analyze each patent application to decide whether it was a strategic agent. But now the Ministry of Health in Brazil publishes every year a list of agents which are strategic for the single health system. We also have the use of the purchasing power of the Brazilian administration to improve access. As I have said earlier on, the single health system spends about $6.5 billion in medication and other industrial products. However, so this gives the administration a very strong purchasing power to organize the market according to the needs of the system, working through this list, those lists of strategic products. The third element is regulation, the concept of comprehensiveness in the single health system. There was Parliament wrote about this, but what's this comprehensiveness in the single health system? It's based on three elements: fairness, universality, and comprehensiveness. What is comprehensiveness? Well, what can be supplied through the system and what the system cannot supply. This idea, this was never regulated up to now. So We are talking about using technology. Thomas said that our countries haven't solved the issue of including technological developments or breakthroughs, but they have been breakthroughs lately with the setting up of a national commission and incorporating technology in the Ministry of Health. And finally, we have associations for productive development. These associations
started with a TRIPS flexibility. It was the only time that Brazil produced a compulsory licensing. It was against Merck Sharp and Dome, and it was for an antiretroviral. This compulsory license, the Ministry of Health at the time it was issued in 2007, asked why should I move away from Merck Sharp and Dome and have to resort to another big pharma? So there was an agreement where 3 pharmaceutical Brazilian companies committed to produce the drug and supply it to formulate it and supply it to the public health system. That was the first private-public partnership for productive purposes. We have many public laboratories or pharmaceutical companies in Brazil. We have also chemical companies, so having this installed capacity allowed us to perfect the procedure, and today we have about 100 private-public partnership with different levels. Out of those 100 associations or partnerships, actually, we have this number of products. This is the registry in Anvisa, which is our FDA, and we have 19 products that have been already purchased by the ministry as a result of the partnerships. These products have a big added value, especially antipsychotic drugs, olanzapine, quetiapine, rivastapine, many million reals. It's about $80 million. Now, which are the new challenges? I believe we have a new kid in the block, which is hepatitis C. What we call the big pharma crisis is trying to come out of the crisis in a very peculiar way. Somebody mentioned yesterday, maybe Tomas, somebody said that Millet Laboratory launched a wonderful drug based on evidence to treat hepatitis C. We have 3 million people infected with hepatitis C virus. The studies to check the virus load in Brazil say that hepatitis C will be the main problem in Brazil unless we do something. Currently, the treatment lasts a year. It's a combination of interferon with ribavirin. Half the people is cured, half is not, and the secondary effects here are very important. But now there's a new treatment that in 12 weeks patients are 90% cured, so 90% efficacy. So the pharmaceutical companies launching this, they have the name of Sovaldi, and it is called the $1,000 pill, $1,000 per pill, $84,000 the treatment. The other 2 molecules in the market have similar prices, maybe a little lower. So what's the challenge? I know the Ministry of Health is negotiating with Gilead, I don't know exactly what the outcome of the negotiations will be, but if we produce a simulation, if we get half the price, that is $42,000 per treatment, to treat 200,000 patients already diagnosed or already in a serious stage of the disease with cirrhosis, we're going to spend about $8,400 million, 8.54 billion. The entire basket in the system is 6 million. So this is just unaffordable. This is a negotiation that cannot be sealed or signed. Now, another aspect of the challenge is what Gilead did. Gilead, driven by a humanitarian spirit, had a compulsory license for 7 companies. It was a voluntary license for 7 companies in India to produce the molecule, but the markets those Indian companies can reach are certain markets. In South America, only Bolivia and maybe Suriname. All the other countries are not included in the agreement, and India, of course, can use the drugs. I think it's just goodwill, but this goodwill has something behind, because the producer can be India, and India can formulate generic drugs to give treatment to or to attend compulsory licenses that are compulsory in other countries. Though I believe this is a novelty, this is something new. It's a market regulation, selective market regulation, made by a patent holder. He chose yesterday. Somebody wondered, no, Ken wonder, where are the bodies? Well, the health systems are there to say who's going to die and who is not. And Milan is saying that these people are going to live, these people are going to die. So this is a new challenge, because countries such as Argentina, Brazil, and others outside South America, Colombia maybe, that have some industrial capacity, can start studying local development of the molecule, because I believe it will be necessary at a certain point in time to start negotiating with Gilead, and having not the usual negotiations, but with the compulsory license in your hand, because that makes the person sitting at the table much more flexible. The Ministry of Health, I know because I was part of the ministry at that time, discussed with a patent holder. She had a patent on a molecule, and the ministry wanted a lower price. It was difficult to negotiate, but as we continued, as we showed the possibility of a compulsory license, price dropped by 50%. So I think this is important. In order to finish, another challenge, this is another challenge. This price that Sovaldi has, probably Sovaldi is not an isolated case. It may be a new trend, as long as we get medicines that are as efficient as this one, and prices will come down if that happens. This is something we should be aware of, and we should be ready to face these challenges. This is what this Fierce Pharma report says. It's a very well-known report, and it says that the nosebleed price reflects a trend, not an exception to the rule. Well, this is what I wanted to tell you. Thank you very much.